One day they're banging up burglars and chasing crooks. The next they are rubbing hot oil into businessmen's bodies or performing magic tricks at children's parties. Yes, 1 in 10 police employees now moonlight in another job on their days off or once their shifts are finished. And that work is varied to say the least. They are masseurs and magicians, as mentioned. They're worm breeders, pallbearers, ski instructors, ice cream salesmen, priests and even pole dancing instructors. The Police Federation says that in an ideal world, no officer would need to take a second job. But times are tough and many bobbies take on the extra work just to make ends meet. They say police salaries, which start at around £22,000 a year, are not always enough. But a number of MPs, including Keith Vaz, the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, say that they're worried that cops with second jobs might be exhausted and distracted from their duties, namely protecting the public and catching criminals. Are you supposed to be quietly chasing leads in your spare time if you're a policeman or policewoman, like all the great TV detectives, Sarah Lunt, for example, or Morse? Should the police be banned from holding second jobs? Let's speak to Mike Pannett, former Metropolitan Police Officer and the author of Upbeat Down Dale, who says some officers need to take on second jobs to make ends meet. Joins us from York. And in Bangor is Di Davis, who was Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police. Di Davis, first of all, you think no officer should ever have a second job?
No, and I would refer everyone back to the basic principles as laid down by Sir Robert Peel, that police officers should devote the whole of their time to being police officers. And I don't think having a second job is incumbent on that role, because the role of the police is to be of the public, to serve the public and to protect the public. And if they've got second jobs who take them away from that basic role, they could be tired, they could be all kinds of things, they could be compromised. So in a nutshell, no, no, no.
Mike Pannett, can you respond?
Well, first of all, Happy New Year to you, Jeremy, and to the listeners. Well, and a couple of things just to to go back to. I've just heard what Di says there, and I feel that's rather out of touch. And also, you talk about new starter salaries of around 22,000. In fact, it is 19,000. And a third thing, it's not really moonlighting, because look, all police officers which have, as we say, in secondary jobs, of course it's not ideal, but let's be right, all these secondary jobs have to be authorised by the chief constables of the force where the officer works, and it is absolutely the case that, look, officers are struggling. When you're looking at a police officer who's starting out on £19,000 and they're paying the highest contributions in the public sector and they've got families to support...
Well, that's the very starting salary there,
really
isn't it?
Difficult. Well, it's the new starting salary of 19,000. But you actually have to look into exactly what police officers are taking on as secondary jobs, and of course, if it involves anything, and this is the chief constable's decision of each force, is whether or not it's going to interfere with their job, and if it is, then they get declined and are not allowed to do it.
Di
So
Davis,
they're very strict guidelines.
Di Davis, do you think the money's not enough?
Well, the Windsor report, I don't agree with a great deal of the Windsor report, and he has recommended a much lower starting pay, and I don't actually agree with that. You know, the office of constable is something that some of us who joined in the 60s, it was a vocation. It wasn't a job. You really, like a nurse or a teacher, you really wanted to do it, and you really wanted to do the job properly. In my humble opinion, it is very humble. Chief constables are wrong. They're all crying out that there's not enough officers, that they haven't got enough time. Well, you can't have it both ways. You either devote yourself full time, and certainly throughout my career as a street cop, most of it, I did work hugely long hours, and I simply would be too exhausted to have a second job. I'm worried that we're not giving full force to fighting crime and arresting people, and that's what we should be doing, along with preventing crime.
Does this come down, Mike, to the idea that certain professions, the police is definitely one of them, is a whole of, as Di says, it's a life choice almost. It's a vocation. You're a police officer 24 hours a day. And therefore, when you're not working as one, you're not being a lap dancer, you're looking for clues.
Well, and going back to the lap dancer, I think, look, there's been a bit of a media campaign to discredit the sort of police service, and that lap dancer we're talking about there, Jeremy, is actually, it was looked on and investigated, and it was somebody who was running a fitness class. It was
farmer,
a civilian member
fisherman,
staff.
football scouts, flower rangers, organiser of an Ann Summers party, vicar, pallbearer, undertaker, assistant coroner, ski instructor. There's loads of them.
Listen, they're human beings. There's huge restrictions on police officers, both on duty and off duty. And this year I've done many many interviews on policing issues, and one thing I talked about often is leadership, and of course leading by example. And you only have to look at the very people that are sort of calling into question. You look at our MPs, what secondary jobs they've got, and in fact the new police crime commissioners, a lot of those are all running secondary jobs. So
but my question wasn't about
that. We've got to lead by example.
My question was really about, it's not a hostile question, this. You are in a very special profession, and you need 24 hours a day to be a police officer, because when you're not working in uniform, you're looking around, you're being aware, you're being alert.
You're absolutely right. Police officers are never off duty, and I've met some very brave police officers who always intervene off duty. That's part and parcel of it. But that's what we're actually talking about here, is things to make ends meet. There's also even things like if you adopt a child, that's declared as a business interest. So I think you've got to look very carefully. You've highlighted a few of the sort of high profile, if you like, off-duty secondary jobs there, Jeremy, but a lot of them are involving charitable work and all sorts of things. But I go back to this. It's very strict guidelines and what you can and cannot do as a secondary job, and that's all done by the Chief Constable.
Davison, to defend the police who do these secondary jobs, it does not stop them being police officers, does it? Because actually, if you are, for example, a priest in your spare time, or a football scout, as somebody is, you are getting access to a whole area of society which you don't see when you're in uniform.
Yes, listen, there are aspects of this which, of course, it is suitable for officers, particularly charity work and football for youngsters. I'm all for that. It's when you start to get into serious professions. And, I was talking to a friend of mine. In fact, he's president of one of the companies I work for. He's a former fire chief. And I stand to be corrected. But, they have stopped allowing, in many fire brigade areas, firemen doing secondary duty because they found they were too exhausted to actually do what they're paid to do. And I'm really worried with a huge percentage now. And look, I bow to no one in my respect for police officers. The vast majority are superb and do a hell of a good job. And as I say, a lot of the Windsor report are wrong. But this is wrong in my humble opinion. It is wrong in principle. It is wrong as laid down by the founding fathers of the Metropolitan Police. And I really can't see it happening. And it takes away from the professionalism which some of us are so proud of. I go around the world doing what I do, and wherever you go, if you say you're from the Metropolitan Police or Scotland Yard or even British Police, you're still held in huge respect. I don't want to see that damaged by Mr. Vaz or anyone else. And there are a lot of kettles calling pots black at the moment, and he's a particularly one. But I won't go into that. Look, the police deserve a huge amount of respect, but they have to earn respect, and they continually have to earn respect on the streets of Britain, and we're not seeing enough of them on the street.
Di Davis, Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, thank you. And thanks also to Mike Pannett, former Met officer and the author of Upbeat Down Dale, disagreeing on whether any police officer should be allowed to have a second job.